up guys, my name is Mike Man, welcome back to yet another video. Now today we are going to do a discussion video because a lot of caffeines kick up in regards to what I want to discuss today and kind of put into a preface of what's what. And then to try to debunk a long age question that's happened for about 2-3 years now. So, the question for today is what's better to look, Raven Ridge or Death Row? Now, both have their pros, both have their cons as well, and a lot of people seem to be in the aspect of not being sure on what's the best area to look in. And to preface this, we have a few kind of different things to look into in terms of different tiers kind of aspect for these. To kind of fundamentally explain what these areas are, so Raven Ridge is kind of like a national park for a national woods kind of thing for Fairview, the city, and Death Row is a dangerous, very dangerous part of Fairview City as well. So they both have very unique environments and different kind of infected or zombies, as we would put it. Whereas in Raven Ridge you have wolves, bears, deer, and miscellaneous parts of with different kind of environmental things taken into place. Whereas in Death Row you have the most mutated kind of things there, like the Thousand Arms, the I don't know what else we call them these days, but the evolved long arms as well. Both areas are unique in their own different ways, but fundamentally both act very differently. And we today are going to kind of debunk what is kind of what here. So to kind of start off with the first kind of iteration of these kind of two areas of the map is Death Row. Now Death Row is particularly more geared to an end-game zone, and a lot of people will agree that it does take a bit more skill and time to kind of manage yourself down there. And on the screen right now you'll have a little video of Death Row itself from one of the streams I did in the last month, so enjoy that. So with Death Row, we have quite a lot of different things to discuss with it, and thankfully we kinda can use something to push things along to understand the aspects of it, and that's on the Death Frontier Wikipedia. So fundamentally, this row right here is Death Row. We can use these as our base values, and also just to scroll up so you can understand what these are. So weapon, armor, base weapon, armor, chance, food, and ammunition. So Death Row, we have a chance to loot from level 100 to 125 weapons. Armors are 35 to 75. It's a 3% base percentage to loot, and you get access to Whiskies, 8B, Neoton 5A, and a bunch of different kind of ammos. Now, fundamentally, we're not going to worry about ammo in this kind of aspect for loot because we don't loot the ammo down there, and this is somewhat outdated now I've realised because down Death Row you can also loot biomass as well as energy cells, which is something that Raven Ridge is missing. But fundamentally these still act the exact same way in terms of the weapons and armour we loot, and obviously the medication we loot from here as well, still the same. So from a weapon perspective you can expect to loot pretty much anything from level 100 to 120, and that's including the Death Row exclusive stuff. So what I mean by that is you've got your Inquisitor, you've got your X-Hammer, which I'm pretty sure could be looted out anywhere, but it's mainly found down here. You've got your, try to think off the top of my head, X-Manberg, you've got the Scorcher, you've also got the, oh, it's struggling to remember now, the Gull, BWL, something like that, the shotgun. There's something, different things down here that is lootable in that sense. You also have the armors, which is the XL Mesh and the Vital Core Reactive as well. They're unique to here, as well as two unique backpacks that the blueprints can only be looted down here, which is the Commuter and the Trekker backpacks. Now, all these can be found down here, on top of a golden sledgehammer, which is kinda chef kiss. And there is just a bit more uniqueness down here than there is in Raven Ridge, just to throw that bat right into the sea right now. But on the offset of that, despite the more unique items you can get, there is a worse loot pool compared to Raven Ridge, and you can compare it from here alone. So the issue with Death Row right now is the armors for me specifically, and the fact you can loot a claw hammer down there as well. So for armors, you can look the RX2, the SLX, those 20k scraps, but you don't necessarily want to find, but you will find them, unfortunately. And people use Death Row and say it's better because you get scrap quicker. It means you can return to the bunker, scrap it, and return. That's one method of doing it. But then you've also got the aspect of 5As down there, which is the unique version, the unique medication that's only found down there, and scientists and cloud machines. Unfortunately, it's not as unique due to those factors. It's not worth picking up these days. It's only 30k, and you get more from other stuff selling on the market. So fundamentally, you got the same cat aspects as Raven Ridge, where the bosses drop master crafts, and they both obviously have up to certain amounts. The other aspect of Death Row is it does actually have a special, unique kind of zombie in a sense. It's got the Behemoth, which drops Behemoth biomass, and obviously you can go from there to craft the Apex from that in a sense through this crafting system. Whereas with Raven Ridge, you don't have that opportunity. There's nothing in there just yet. Might be in the works, but we don't know. The other aspect of Death Row is it's not as convenient as a run. You, at lower levels, will struggle to make it down there and feel as if the run time to get down there is just your burnout, then you'll just go kaput and that's it. Death Row is made up two different areas. They're both a pink and purple area. I can't remember what one's what because it's been a while since it sent me down, but there is some rumour, conspiracy that the deeper colour is actually giving you better results, but that's unconfirmed at this stage. The other aspect of this discussion is also Raven Ridge, which came out a couple of years ago. Now you have a better chance to loot better scrap items, in all honesty. So it ranges from level 100 to 135. So that's for melee, and level 90 to 135 for guns. Your armors are either level 45 to 75. Same base 3%. And again, this is another thing I've noticed that is missing. So one thing I have noticed from this sheet here, now again, like I said, these are fundamentally the exact same kind of base rates, and it is correct. So in Death Row, you also get to look a unique thing called experimental serum as well, and you get bandits, and obviously bandits are kind of void there. Whereas in Raven Ridge, you get access to, I would say, a better clump of actual foods items there. So for example, you get the energy bar, which gives a base speed boost for 15 minutes. You get a meat jerky, which gives 20%, 25%, and they're quite common. MRE, that gives 100 and becomes more cost effective. And the first aid kit mini first aid kit that heals 50 for just dragging it, and 150 if administered, which is kind of crazy in honesty. So I would say aspect for that, for service classes and that, Raven Ridge is a bit better for your food stuff sitting down there. There's more of a demand in Death Row, however, it can be easily offset by the amount of alts people have these days, so take it with a pinch of salt. And fundamentally, in Raven Ridge, you have the access to all the 130, 135 weapons that sat in Raven Ridge. The chances of obviously looting other stuff, which I'll get into momentarily later on in the video, as well. You have a better chance to loot I'm trying to think of a idea. A battle axe here than you do in SEZ, because the Southeast Zone definitely have a more convoluted looting pool in terms of what kind of items you can loot, in honesty. Whereas in Raven Ridge, you have a better tick for that specific kind of item. And the reason why I'm bringing this up as a specific tick, because the items you loot are more condensed. For example, you have a chance again to loot a Clawhammer in Death Row, and you won't be able to loot any in Raven Ridge, as a kind of example for that complexity from it. Your armors would be from, like for example, Exterminator Meshes up to, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, a Shabona Mesh, Tataku, Reactive. Those are the kind of armors you can expect there. Raven Ridge doesn't exactly have the most unique ones. We have, for example, the Asphodel Ghost, we have the Noble Nadachi, the BM14 Survive. Can't remember off the top of my head. Is it Survivor? Survival or Slaughter? It's a Slaughter, BM14 Slaughter. So that's kind of the only unique kind of like alternatives from that, and I've even missed some off Death Row as well, because Death Row has a Mutilator, the Piercer, and the Dreadnought on top of the existing ones there. Fundamentally, Raven Ridge is a much smaller area. It has different kind of environmental zones, and regardless of where you go, you have a lot to kind of look for. So, for example, you've got the chem plant and you've got a prison. There are points of interest within the area that people are drawn to naturally and want to loot and see what you can get. The zombies are a bit more different than your Fairview City kind zombies, and the enemies there are fundamentally just animals, and they kind of drop the kind of same idea of massive crafted items from the bosses, same as Death Row, minus the unique once a day spawn. So it kind of loses out on that kind of value there. Because of how close Raven Ridge is to a outpost, for example, Camp Valkyrist, people find it a lot more easier to go loot, and fundamentally it is a better scrap point over Death Row. And a lot of people seem to be still missing that point of Raven Ridge's why it's specifically where it is and why Death Row is still so far away. To kind of end this in a fundamental point, both these zones are good for different aspects, and they're good for their own specific reasons. Fundamentally, from my point of view, again, people don't agree with my points, and that's absolutely fine. It's my opinion. Depending on what one you want to go for, it depends on what's better. If you are looking for a quick scrap run, fundamentally, Raven Ridge is better because of how close it is to a outpost. The other aspect for between both of these is you can loot more treasures in Raven Ridge than you can Death Row. For example, you can loot sapphires, emeralds, gems, rubies in Raven Ridge. In Death Row, you can only loot amethysts and a crown. So that loot pool is a bit more different for that aspect as well. So fundamentally, you could get more out of Raven Ridge as a scrap run than you will from Southeast Zone, so Death Row. If you're wanting to commit to a run, so say for example you are on the same boat as me, you want to, let's say, you have 450 storage slots and you want to fill them up instead, you would be better off going down to a Southeast Zone. You will be able to loot a lot more things to scrap, and you might get a ticket item there on top of the Death Row exclusive stuff. For example, like I said, the Inquisitor, the Gal, BMW, whatever it is, BMW. The A10 Bull Shark, and the list kind of goes on from there. The Scorcher, at the same time, that's another one. You have more of a chance to put yourself and get that. Fundamentally, the 120s should be a lot easier to loot overall because of how these cast systems work. Obviously, 130s and 135s should be quite a bit harder to loot, whereas obviously 120s should be somewhat easier in that sense. But again, RNG is a thing. With how these two are, like I said, if I want to do a scrap run just to make, say for example, 20 mil just right off the back for a week, I would go Raven Ridge, Arcade in the prison, and I'll just do a run around that constantly until I've got full storage, and I'll drive the Zombie Express back to Camp Valkyrist. Or if I go to Death Row, I will keep looting until I'm happy with what I've got, and fundamentally I'll find other stuff that might be of better use. For example, the Trekker backpack and such, and obviously the gem crown craft. Hopefully, if you can get all the stuff there. Yeah. What I would like to know now is where would you guys prefer to go loot? In that sense, obviously I'm not going to throw up a Raven Ridge looting thing, loot video, because what's the point? Everyone has their own kind of unique playstyle. Well, I say unique, but everybody has their own kind of playstyle, their own preferences and places they like to loot. I am curious what you guys like to loot. what has been your best find in said place, and would you consider going to the other place on the map? Um, yeah, that's my question for you guys. That being said, also as for shits and giggles, if you've ever seen the video, don't look at this place. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great day, great time. I think I'm going to go do a look run on Death Row, and yeah, I'll see you later. Goodbye.